Hello, friends. This is Twilight Stories, bringing you some of your favorite childhood classics, modern stories, and spooky tales over the summer. Please sit back and relax as I read Was It a Dream? Guy De Maupassant is the author of this one, and I'm sorry if I butchered that. And here we go. I loved her madly. Why does one love? Why does one love? How strange it is to see one being in the world, to have but one thoughts in one mind, one desire in the heart, and one name on the lips, a name that comes up continually rising from the depths of the soul like a water in a spring, and which one repeats over and over again, and murmurs ceaselessly everywhere like a prayer. I'm not going to tell you our story. Love is always the same. I met her and I loved her, and that's all. And for a whole year, I lived in her tenderness, her caress, in her arms, hung on her words and looks, loved her dresses, and was so completely wrapped and bound, imprisoned in everything that penetrated from her, that I no longer knew whether it was day or night, if I was dead or alive, on this old earth of ours or elsewhere. And then she died. How? I don't know. I no longer know. But one evening she came home wet, for it was raining heavily, and the next day she coughed, and she coughed for about a week, and took her to bed. What happened I do not remember now, but doctors came, wrote prescriptions, and went away. Medicines were brought, and a woman made her drink them. Her hands were hot, her forehead was burning, and her eyes bright and sad. When I spoke to her, she answered me, but I don't remember what she said. I have forgotten everything. Everything! Everything! And she died. And I very well remember her little faint sigh. Her last. The nurse said, "Ah." And I understood. I understood. I knew nothing more. Nothing. I saw a priest who said, "Your sweetheart," and it seemed to me as if he was insulting her. As she was dead, nobody had the right to know our relationship, and I turned him out. Another came who was very kind and tender, and I shed tears when he spoke to me about her. They consulted me about the funeral, but I do not remember anything that they said, though I distinctly recall the coffin and the strokes of a hammer as they nailed it down on it. Oh, God. God. She was buried. Buried. She in that hole. Some people came, female friends. I made my escape and I ran away. I ran, and then I walked. I walked through the streets and finally went home. And the next day, I started on a journey. Yesterday I returned to Paris when I saw my room again. Our room. Our bed, our furniture, everything that remained of the life of the human being after death. I was seized by such a violent reoccurrence of grief that I came very near opening the window and throwing myself into the street, as I could no longer remain in the midst of these things, between these walls which were enclosed and sheltered her, and which retained 1,000 atoms of her, and her skin and her breath, and their impenetrable crevices. I took up my halt to make my escape, and just as I reached the door, I passed the large glass in the hall, which she had put there so she can look at herself every day from head to foot as she went out, to see if her toilet was in order, and was correct and pretty, from her little boots to her hat. And I stopped short, in front of the looking glass in which she had often been reflected. So often, that it also must have restrained of her reflection. I was standing there trembling with my eyes fixed on the glass, on that flat, profound, empty glass, which had contained her entirely, and had possessed her as much as I had, as my passionate looks had. I felt as if I loved that glass. I touched it, and it was cold. Oh, the recollection. Sorrowful mirror, burning mirror, alive mirror, horrible mirror, which makes us suffer such torments. Happy are the men whose heart is like a mirror whose images glide and pass away, that forgets all it has contained, reflected, and all of it basked in its love and affection. But how I suffer. I went out and without knowing it, without wishing it, walked into the cemetery. I found her simple grave, a white marble cross, with these few words. She loved, was beloved, and died. She was there beneath the ground, decomposed. How horrible. I sobbed with my forehead to the ground. I remained there for a long time. A long time. Then I saw that it was getting dark and strange. A mad wish, the desire of despairing lover seized me. I wished to pass the night, the last night, in weeping on her grave, but I should be seen and driven out. How was I to manage? I was cunning, so I got up and began to roam about the city of the dead. I walked and walked. How this city is, in comparison with the other, the city in which we live, and yet how much more numerous the dead are than the living. We require high houses, wide streets, and much room for the 4 generations who see the daylight in the same time. Dark water from the spring, wine from the vines, and eat the bread from the plains. And for all the generations of the dead, for all that ladder of humanity has descended us, there is scarcely anything, only a field, scarcely anything. The earth takes them back and oblivion affects them. Adieu. At the end of the cemetery, I suddenly perceived the abandoned cemetery where the dead have long since blended with the soil, where the crosses themselves decay, where the last comers will be put tomorrow. It is full of untinted roses, of robust, dark cypress trees, a sad and beautiful garden nourished on human flesh. I was alone, perfectly alone. I hid in a leafy tree and concealed myself completely among the thick and somber branches, waded clinging to the trunk as a shipwrecked man does a plank. When it was dark, quite dark, I left my refuge and began to walk softly, slowly, noisily through the ground, full of dead people, and I wandered about for a long time. Could not find her again. I went on with extended arms, knocking against the tombs with my hands, my feet, my knees, my chest, and even my head, without being able to find her. I touched and felt like a blind man groping his way. I felt the stones, the crosses, the iron railings, the metal wreaths, and the wreaths of faded flowers. I read the names with my fingers by passing them over the letters. What a night! What a night! But I could not find her again. There was no moon. What a night! I was afraid, horribly afraid in these narrow paths between 2 rows of graves. Graves, 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 nothing but graves! On my right, on my left, in front of me, around me, everywhere there were graves. I sat down on them, for what I could no longer walk. My knees were so weak, I could hear my heart beat, and I could hear something else as well. What? A confused, nameless noise. Was the noise in my head, in the impenetrable night beneath the mysterious earth, the earth sown with human corpses? I looked about me, but I could not say how long I remained there. I was paralyzed with terror, drunk with fright, ready to shout, ready to die.
What's going on?
Suddenly, it seemed to me as if the slab of marble in which I was sitting was moving. Certainly, it was moving, as if it were being raised. With a bound, I sprang on the neighbor's tomb, and yes, I distinctly saw the stone which I had left, the standing upright, and the dead person appeared, a naked skeleton that was pushing the stone with its back, and with its bent back. I saw clearly, although the night was dark. On the cross I read, "Here lies Jacques Oliviet, who died at the age of 51. He loved his family, was kind and honorable, and died in the peace of the Lord." The dead man also read was inscribable on his tombstone. Then he picked up a stone off the path, a little pointed one, and began to scribe the letters carefully. He slowly effaced them altogether, and with the hollows of his eyes he looked at the places that they were engraved, and with the tip of the bone that he had with his forefinger, he wrote in luminous letters, like those lines which one traces on walls at the tip of lucifer match. "Here reposes Jacques Oliviet, who died at age 51. He hastened his father's death by his unkindness, and he wished to inherit his fortune. He tortured his wife, tormented his children, deceived his neighbors, robbed everyone he could, and died wretched." When he had finished writing, the dead man stood motionless, looking at his work, and on turning around I saw the graves were open, and all the dead bodies had emerged from them, and all that effaced the lies inscribed on the gravestones by their relations, and had substated the truth instead. I saw that all had been the tormentors of their neighbors, malicious, dishonest hypocrites, liars, rogues, envious culminators, that they had even stolen, deceived, performed every disgraceful, every abominable action. These good fathers, these faithful wives, these devoted sons, these chaste young girls, these honest tradesmen, these men and women who are called irreproachable, they were all riding at the same time on the threshold, their eternal abode, the truth, the cruel, terrible, the holy truth, which every one on earth is ignorant of or pretends to ignore. I thought that she also must have written something on her tombstone. And now, running without any fear amongst the half-open coffins, amongst the corpses and skeletons, I went to her, sure that I would find her immediately. And I recognized her at once, without seeing her face, which was covered by a winded sheet, and on a marble cross, where shortly before I read, "She loved, was loved, and died." I now read, "Having gone out one day, in order to deceive her lover, she caught cold in the rain, and died. It appears that they found me at daybreak, lying on the grave unconscious." The end. And that concludes our story, friends. Thank you so much for listening. And if you liked our content and what you heard today, feel free to flick that like button and subscribe. Otherwise, please leave a comment and or a constructive criticism, as we can only get better. And if you're interested in hearing your own original stories or fan fictions read back to you, please feel free to reach out. We want this to be a safe community in which you feel safe to share your art and talents. And as always, please stay safe, stay healthy, and stay you.